Well, let me ask you a couple of things. You're going to focus on making prosthetics for people in developing countries, right? And you're going to look at that country somewhere in Africa, is that correct? Or
Yes, developing countries or non-profit organizations,
or nonprofit organizations.
universities.
So these will be limb replacements and for accidents or mines, things like that, right?
Yeah, any type of amputees. Probably more, we will be focusing probably on the hands.
I guess what I always look at is, one, is there anybody else doing this yet that may not be providing the service that you're going to provide? And what are you thinking about doing for your business? Are you going to be providing just the prosthetics, or are you going to be providing, for example, would somebody come into a clinic, be measured for a prosthetic, you design it, put it on, see if it fits, see if it works, and then there's probably other things related to attachments and motors and pieces that you need. And at the same time, how would you do this cost effectively? I'm looking at the sophistication. I mean, it's one thing to have an artificial leg where it needs to fit, but there's not a lot of moving parts to it. Whereas the hand here you're showing, are you going to want the hand to be able to grab things, or
like for example this
kit that it is? I see the more expensive it will be to make it, right? So one of the questions, I mean, the really the big question I can't answer yet, but I can certainly show you what you need to be understanding is how many. Basically, there's two components: your revenues and your costs, right? And whatever's left over is your profit. So the revenue is based on the number of units that you have, whether that's hands or feet or legs and knees, whatever you're developing, and then the price that you can charge for those. And then your costs are the costs of all the components, the costs of the machines, the rapid prototyping, 3D printers.
Yeah.
And
actually, the cost is approximately $400 to $500.
Right, but then you have to put plastics and the polymers and things in there, right? And then you have to design. There's some time for designing the shape, right? How are you going to
do design? I guess they are looking to get some open source designs and build it over that or.
Right, but building it means some individual is going to take their time. So whether you can do that for equity, or you can hire somebody. Typically, if equity is cheaper, but unless you have somebody who's really skilled, it may not be a high enough quality to do what you need to do. So that's always the trade-off. Is somebody free with equity, a student or someone, versus someone who has a lot of experience.
Yeah, somebody free, like a student, an employee from the university or engineering schools, or I was thinking also people that just use as printers for their own.
I mean, one hand may not fit you're going to have different size hands, so you're going to have multiple.
Exactly.
They could be for kids and older, so.
Yeah.
This is complex.
Yeah, it is actually complex.
And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to take something that's very complex and very expensive and simplify it to the point where you can sell it for a price in a country where people may not have as much resources. Well, you certainly have to have a proof of concept, so you have to figure out the business before you can franchise it, right? So figuring out the constraints I see are there has to be some sort of design software that will allow you to, if I come in and I need a hand versus you come in and need a hand, your hand's probably smaller, mine's maybe curved a different way, it's wider here, thinner this way than other people's.
Customize it?
So as far as customization, so what are you going to scan though? Are you going to scan this part of the person's wrist where there's no hand? Now if somebody has no hands, then, so I guess what I'm saying is you're going to need some sort of software that can figure out how big of a hand to make and how to fit it. So it fits well, right? And then all the other stuff that you'll need to attach will need to be built into it as well. And then you'll manufacture it. So you'll need to, for every hand will almost need to be customized because each person is. I mean, yeah, there's clothing. Some people. I probably wear the same size shoe as a lot of other people, but there are smaller shoes and bigger shoes and wider shoes and thinner shoes. And same thing with developing. I mean, developing hands is really a custom thing. And I know people that have prosthetic legs, and they have problems with rubbing. And
but we don't want to make a perfect hand. So people from developing countries that don't have the ability to move them, and they just will be happy to have a prosthetic. I mean, we need to understand their desire to just have a hand and something affordable. It can meet their expectation for now.
Well, if that's, I mean, I'm trying to figure out then, whether then you offer a series of, 4 or 5 different sizes of hands. And then the key is the attachment, where it attaches onto the limb, where, is where you have some customization. So you can have a hand that's this big, this big, this big, this big, or this big. Take your pick.
Oh,
and then, I want a small, medium hand, size 2. And then where it attaches, you look at that and say, okay, we'll measure around the wrist here, and it's this many inches. So I guess what I'm saying is there's going to have to be some sort of software that can calculate that for you, and that's going to be a cost.
Yeah,
and then in addition, and then the printers are relatively, affordable, and I don't know how much the polymers are or whatever you put in that extrudes the plastics that come out, and then ultimately, then the other side of it is, well, okay, how much money does that cost? How much can I get for it? If what I can get is more than that with a little bit of, then, do you want 10% profit, 20% profit? Are you going to pay yourselves? Are you guys going to volunteer and work for free? Average person for a company that's a for-profit is you have to generate $200,000 a year per person is what the average is. I don't know what, you would be, comfortable with doing this work.
Because we'll be a lot of
$50,000 a year, $100,000 a year. You got medical expenses. You got other costs as well.
And it can be a liability to use also, no?
You'll have to have liability. You'll have to have insurance. You'll probably need to.
And it can be a patent infringement in the future because we are getting designs from open source. You probably won't be liable at the end, but you have to prove it, and you have to go through legal process.
Yeah, and so that's going to require searching patents, and I mean, if you get open source software off the web, how do you know that it was developed by that person and not stolen from Medtronic or some other company where it was part of another piece and they walked out with it, and for them to do something for themselves, no one's pursued them. But now, but that is a risk.
How do you see that we can protect?
You might have to have somebody that designs something custom for you,
and
or put things together. Again, I don't know that much about open source and who actually owns it. It's supposed to be available for anyone to use as long as you don't commercialize it. So what happens when you commercialize it? Because you're going to commercialize it.
Yeah.
And do you have to pay a royalty? The tricky part with a business is, from a business standpoint, I always want to have something proprietary that nobody else can make, because then it makes it, there's less chance of competition. And also, you don't want somebody taking your open source code once you've developed it and piecing together the same thing that you're doing and come in and undercut you as well if it's a business. Now, if you're providing this as a service and there's some other model that you're using, for example, a government is paying you regardless of what software you have, as opposed to a customer at the end coming in saying, I want to buy one of these hands, it's $250, here's my $250, and make a hand for me. But if a government's saying, we want you to make hands for everybody in the village or everybody in our country, or we're willing to give you so much insurance coverage for each hand, and then the person hands it out, tricky. So, I mean, the concept's interesting. I think that there are some challenges you're going to have as far as the making sure that what you're using is you have freedom to operate, I guess is the term, where you can use that.
It's going to work in the market, though.
Well, a lot of times people patent things long before. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is a perfect example. As soon as they discover a molecule, they'll patent it. This molecule does this, this, and this, can be used in this disease and that disease, and then they take it through testing. And about the time that it's, because you want to protect it while it's going through development. So they'll patent it. The problem with the pharmaceutical industry is by the time the product reaches the market, they've only got about, it's anywhere from 6 to 8 years left on the patent.
Because
They charge a lot
money
for
for
them
it.
because they only have 6 years to make it up, and if they don't sell much, then
They lost money.
They lost money, absolutely. My concern is that right now I don't know if this is a profitable venture because I don't know how many potential customers you might have, what the prices might be for the prosthetics versus the costs. So the financial side of things, and also I don't know what your potential revenues might be because I don't know how many people there are out there. So it really gets down to your market and how many people are there out there that need limbs. How many of those people are there that can pay? It's different. You might have a lot of people out there with limbs, but there may not be as many people who can pay. Of those who pay, how long will those limbs last, and do they need to have them remade later?
Probably.
So is this a process that every 2 or 3 years,
They have to come back.
Is there any issue related to if the hand breaks within X number of months, do you have to make another one for free? And so those are the costs. And then the issues related to what software, upgrading the software, whether the 3D printing, what size printer you're going to buy, how large, what kind of throughput. Of all of a sudden, wow, we're doing great. We need 1,000 hands today.
Yeah.
How do you do that with one little desktop printer? You can't. That I see is you don't yet understand the potential revenue versus what it's going to cost for this. Who might know how many amputees there are?
Hospitals, I guess.
So you might have to go to hospitals and go through and see if you can get hold of hospital data for how many amputees they have or amputees they see in a year. I don't know if those statistics are kept in other countries. They might be kept in the United States, but I don't think the United States is a particularly good proxy for those other countries. So picking a couple of large hospitals that are in regions where you think that you might want to launch your business, you might be able to get information from them because they're going to be the people who are sewing these people back up or treating them, bandaging them, etc.
That's a good idea, actually.
So there should be, if they keep good records, and I don't know whether they're handwritten records, they're probably not electronic, which means you might have to have somebody go in and get permission and do what's called a chart audit, where you look at all the, again, if it's a chaotic system, it could take you more time than ever. It's very tricky. Even in the United States, it's hard to find some of this information.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do, which might be a proxy, is you might be able to interview 10 or 12 surgeons in those countries. You'll have to pay them and ask them, how many patients do you typically see a month for amputations? Of those patients that you see, what percentage are hands versus feet or legs or knees or whatever else, and then ask your questions that way. It won't be exact, but you'll be closer to knowing what you need to know than just guessing. And that's qualitative information. The other way that you can do it is you can set up a survey online, and then make some questions and ask people. There are real cheap software programs, SurveyMonkey and a few others, where you go to those and they can ask questions. And then also it has analytics, so it can actually calculate and give you percentages and ranges and highs and lows and things.
Yeah,
that might be helpful as well. Primary market research, where you're not looking at statistics necessarily, might be a way to get this. But if you can go into a hospital, that will be more accurate because you'll be able to count up how many procedures there were and complications that result. Rapid prototyping for medical. Is there any way to, is there a way to rapid prototype materials using biocompatible? Is there some way that the products that you're producing in the 3D printer could actually go inside of a body without your body reacting to it?
That's actually
And the reason I ask is sometimes people have wounds where they have like parts of their skull,
And they are doing it now.
and they do it now. They make plates and things, and they put them in.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in a emerging, developing country, they may not have those tools or the resources to do it. So
That's an excellent idea.
So I've seen that before. I don't know. So
Wonderful.
instead of using metal, is there some way to? And I'm guessing, there ought to be some way that you could take a picture and it would, show you the contour, and then you. I think the end user person would probably be a surgeon again. It sounds like a lot of the starting point, maybe the ending point for this, because the surgeon's going to close the wound or ultimately decide that it's not healing, we got to cut it off, or there's something wrong here, we got to cut it off. So that surgeon's going to take care of it and then close it up. And then if somebody comes in and they've got they've been in an accident and their a piece of their skull was cracked or something, and it's not going to heal right, and they have to take it out. It's interesting. The person in the United States, the patient is the one that needs it. The insurance company is the one that pays for it, and the doctor decides which one you get.
Yes, exactly.
So it's really those three people. So in this case, because you're going to developing countries, I don't know who the payer is, whether it's governments.
Sometimes, yeah, most of them have universal.
So then you've got to kind of work with them to make sure that okay, we're going to do this, but if we do it, it looks like it's going to cost about this much. Can you pay that? And if they say no, who pays then? Because the doctor won't pay for it, and the individual doesn't have the money. So that's.
So now my next question.
and that gets back to how many units you might sell, and how much it costs per unit. Your revenue, the top line. That's what's unclear yet. And as you start thinking about it, it's.
That's what you can say is going to be profitable or not.
We don't know. We don't know
until we got this information.
Because you haven't interviewed the government to see or done any research in governments to see how much they're paying for prosthetics or other things that people have. This sounds like it might be something that's a choice of the individual. There may be something that they're using, like the hooks, hand hooks or whatever, that allow you to pick things up. That they'd rather have something that looks more like a hand, but that's a choice. They have something that's functional, but is it? Usually choices cost more than the things that are available. You're almost going to. What I'm hearing from your business is you want to make the bare minimum product that satisfies the need of the patient at a price point that is affordable, but also high enough to provide you with some profit. So you've got sort of this, this bullseye. Can't be too much of this, can't be too much this way, and it's got to land in this little area. As far as quality versus cost versus price that you can get versus number, so I think you need to do some market research. I think you need to target an area and ask yourself how many people, first, can we identify how many people are amputees? Second thing, how much money do people spend on amputees for prosthetics or limbs, etc.? 3, how much, what do we think it's going to cost to get a system in place to produce one of these hands, recognizing that the more that we make, the more the cost goes down, but it'll eventually, you got some, I'm sure, some really smart engineers that can, determine at what point you're going to reach that, relatively low cost.
Yes.
And then ultimately, revenue, and then if it looks like the numbers make sense eventually, and you're, because it's always risk, you don't know how many you're going to sell. And then at that point, then you have to take the leap of faith and find somebody or yourselves to fund and make one hand. Find a patient. Yes. That patient can be anywhere, by the way. It can be in the United States. It can be, you down the street from you. The closer, probably the better. And get a hand and work, and you'll probably have to make several. The first one probably won't work very well, and you'll have to refine it and do it again and do it again. And to that person, say, make them an offer they can't refuse. I'm going to make a hand. I'm going to try to make a hand for you. And it's going to require a multi-step process. You'll get fitted for it and try it for a while. Let us know your feedback. It's free. Plus, we'll pay for, you go to the doctor and get it fitted and check and make sure there's no rash that's developing or anything, any adverse events from the plastic or the sleeve or the glove or. The only way you can calculate the cost is really to go line by line. Okay, we're going to make a hand. How many pieces are in the hand? Yeah. How much time and material is it going to take for each of those pieces? How are we going to connect the pieces? What kind of motor do we have in there? Do we have a motor or no motor? Is there some other? So you'll really have to. It's like going shopping for groceries. You're going to make a meal tonight. I want to have something, a stew. Okay. How much does that cost? Well, it depends. What's in the stew?
Depends on this data.
Same thing with your hand. But how much is your hand going to cost? Well, it depends. How you design it. So you'll probably have to go back and forth. And the testing part is tough because it's always difficult to predict who's going to invest in something. You might find somebody who has a relative or someone who, like an individual. There might be somebody out there who this is their, a war. Like veterans group, people who have been in war, and they're trying to take care of people that are amputees. Is there some charitable group associated with them that makes grants or donations? I'm more than happy to talk to you. I don't know. Honestly, I don't think I'm really qualified for that. I mean, this is it's engineering combined with there's a little bit of a medical component there, but again, you're focusing on markets that are foreign to me. If it was pharmaceuticals, I would say I could help you. I mean, I'm more than happy if you'd like to continue asking questions from time to time or get in touch again.
Yeah, great.
Please feel free to. I'll give you my card,
yes.
and then we can communicate. And I wish you luck. And it's challenging, but
thank you very much for your help today, and I'm happy to meet you today.
Okay, full pleasure. Thank you.
You
You get to turn that off.
Yeah.